Hello, everyone. I'm David Barnard, developer advocate at RevenueCat. And today, for this very special WWDC TLDR, say that 10 times fast, we're going to be chatting with Josh Holtz, senior software engineer here at RevenueCat. Hey, Josh, thanks for...
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for doing this with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So as most of y'all know, we both work for RevenueCat, and a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today, you don't even have to worry about because RevenueCat handles it for you. I do think it's important, though, even as a RevenueCat customer, to actually understand some of what's going on behind the scenes, some of the complexity that we take care of. But then there are some new features that there's quite a few new things that we're talking about today that just are kind of outside RevenueCat's purview that will be interesting to you. And then we will talk about the things that we do talk about, some of that which won't apply to RevenueCat customers, but then we'll talk about why it doesn't apply and how RevenueCat handles it. And so most of you already know, but for those of you who don't, RevenueCat is a subscription app platform. So we have native SDKs for App Store, Play Store, Android, Stripe, as well as Flutter SDKs and other React Native. And so we manage the in-app transactions and then also have pretty sophisticated server-side backend so that you don't have to. Every year, Apple kind of does a little work for us with some of their slides. This year was no exception. In some of the server API slides, there's just a complex web of transaction here to update there to server notification here. And so we handle all that and then normalize that across all the different platforms. And that's another thing. A lot of people think, oh, you just, make StoreKit easy. Well, no, but yes. A lot of the value we also provide is that if you're working cross-platform, it's not just the complexity of managing Apple server-to-server notifications. Android also has server-to-server notifications, and then they have different concepts for how grace periods work, how free trials work. And so we normalize that across your whole stack so that when you're sending a grace period event to Braze to do a win back, you can trigger the same event in Braze from Android, Stripe, iOS. You don't have to configure different life cycles for different platforms because we're able to normalize that across all the different platforms that you're going to have your app on. So I could go on for another 10 minutes pitching RevenueCat, but most of you already use RevenueCat. So let's talk about WWDC. So the first thing I did want to say, I'm a total Apple fanboy, embarrassingly so. I did get to go to WWDC this year. I'm actually in this picture. You can kind of see a red shirt in the first row after the tables there. And it was just an incredible event. Apple does an amazing job. And this event really was incredibly special, being at Apple Park, getting to meet with even more Apple engineers. I get to talk with people on the StoreKit team. They're just milling around in the inside of Apple Park, talking to developers. And they had a whole section of different people from App Store Discovery and people from App Review were there live to just go talk to. It would have been amazing if Apple could have, had 20,000 people there, but whatever, 1,000 or 1,500 were able to go. It was a very special event and a good reminder with the Developer Center and everything else Apple is doing that they do genuinely care about developers. I have my frustrations. RevenueCat, we have our frustrations. I kind of go on and on Twitter about those frustrations personally. But at the end of the day, Apple does care about developers, and the new Developer Center that we got to tour, the whole event was just kind of a love letter to developers because we are the heart and soul of their platform. So I've kind of gushed a little more than intended. Let's get into the meat of this.
Let's do it.
We're going to go through all of the different announcements that are relevant both to RevenueCat and then a few, as I said, that aren't as relevant, but StoreKit 2, right off the bat, very relevant to all of our customers because of what we're going to be able to do. So Josh, what is price locale and why does it matter to RevenueCat and to our customers?
Yeah, so we adopted StoreKit 2 almost as fast as we could try WWDC last year. And it's super nice, makes things easier on our end. Except now we have to manage both StoreKit 1 and StoreKit 2 stuff. And in StoreKit 2, when it was first announced last year, it was actually missing this field. So price locale for an IEP would be like English, French, and that's what we use to format the actual like amount. And Apple does provide a localized price, but sometimes you might want to format the price on your own. So if you're doing like a yearly subscription and you want to show how much it is, divided by 12, you want to display it in the exact same format as the price that Apple has. So with price locale, we actually had that field in StoreKit 1, but it was missing in StoreKit 2.
Gotcha.
So our price formatter was actually using a auto locale in StoreKit 2, which would get it correct maybe most of the time. But it wasn't correct 100% of the time.
Gotcha.
So price locale will actually also, or all these fields actually will get back supported to iOS 15, which is when StoreKit 2 was announced, as long as you're compiling with Xcode 14. So this is something that our users won't have to adopt themselves because we'll handle this.
Gotcha.
But they should see a more consistent once this is released in Xcode 14.
Gotcha. And that's one thing I think a lot of people don't realize the complexity. You were on the team, and I mean, we had quite a few engineers working for the better part of a year to simultaneously convert the entire SDK to Swift, and then also manage both StoreKit 2 and StoreKit 1 seamlessly so that our developers don't have to think about whether somebody's on, in special case, if somebody's on iOS 15 or iOS 16 or iOS 13. And so you can support even further back. I know, the kids apps, and there's so many apps that, and a lot of these mass market apps like, Netflix, they want to support as far back as they possibly can because they have a huge customer base. And that, I have an iPad that my kids use that's like stuck on iOS 9, and it's so frustrating how many apps I can't get now, and which makes sense. Like, we got to move forward, and I just need to toss that and get a new one. But it's great that we're able to support that as far back as we can with StoreKit 1 and make that seamless for our customers. And then it is really cool how now with StoreKit 2, Apple has kind of worked ahead to be able to backport some of this stuff. So it's great that price locale isn't iOS 16 only, because so many of these
was a surprise to me.
Some of these new features end up being iOS 16 only. It's like, oh geez, it'll be years before I can depend on it being there. But it seems like Apple's really doing some great work and being thoughtful about these kind of things. And it's great to see it in StoreKit 2. So the next thing up is
Nick actually had a good question in chat.
Go ahead.
So the price locale is not the currency itself. That's actually already available to us. But the symbol and locale are two different. So an example would be like if a decimal is formatted with a comma or not. So that's what the price locale will determine. So like euros in like English US has a period, where euros in let's say like UK or French, I believe, is comma. So those are two separate. And having
so it's like $22 comma 99 cents. That makes sense.
I'm not a currency expert, so I think that's how it works. We have tests that do this stuff, but I'm like 99% sure.
Yeah, and then now tell me about the server environment in StoreKit 2.
Yeah, so server environment is now will come on a product transaction. And it's also available through another slide that we'll hit next. But if you're looking for the transactions locally on the device, it'll say if the transaction was purchased on Sandbox through Xcode or production. Which this one won't. This server environment for the StoreKit 2 models won't affect our customers since we do everything on the API side. But this is more for the StoreKit 2 direct developers to see if they do need to query transactions or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing. You and I were talking about this earlier while we were prepping. It's pretty cool that since we're doing it client side and sending that up to our server, that you can see that it's an Xcode transaction versus a Sandbox transaction versus a production environment. And having all three of those is great compared to the StoreKit 2 API is only going to give you the production environment and Sandbox environment. And so it's a nice little bonus and could make some things easier to troubleshoot for our customers. And then what about the recent subscription start date?
Yeah, so this one was a little bit of a surprise for me. I didn't know that I wanted this or like how it would affect things. But this is a field that will show if the recent subscription is within the last 60 days, which David explained to me early this morning why this is relevant. I don't know if you want to explain this since you're more informed.
Yeah. So before the App Store Small Developer Program came out and up to $1 million a year in proceeds, developers would get a 15% cut. Apple in I think 2015, 2016 timeframe introduced a lower rate on subscription renewals. So most people in the subscription app business probably remember this because it's actually a huge incentive. So if you're making over $1 million and you're not in the App Store small business program, your initial transaction will be at 30%. And if it's a monthly, then every transaction for the first year, so the first, would that be 11 renewals? So 12 total transactions will all be at 30%, but that 13th transaction will be at 15%. And it's an incentive to retain customers, to build great apps, right? Like people are going to stay subscribed if they value the app. And so Apple was not just incentivizing the subscription business model, but incentivizing to like build great apps using the subscription business model. But there's like a few caveats, as always with Apple. So if there's more than I don't remember all the technicalities. I actually haven't looked this up in a while. But if there's more than a 60-day gap in any 12-month period, it resets the clock. And Josh and I were talking earlier, kids apps is a great example. You might subscribe to a kids app for a few months. The kid gets bored of it. You unsubscribe for a few months and then you come back on and you subscribe for a few months and it's fresh again. My wife does this with like physical toys. She'll put some in the garage for a while and then bring the box back out. It's actually
that's smart.
great.
Yeah.
Little parenting tip there. But that actually kind of messes with the kids app developers because they don't end up with that continuous renewal where they would get the 15%. So what's important about this is that, and Apple didn't say this explicitly. I think sometimes it's like they don't like to talk about money, or I don't know, don't want to highlight the 15%, 30%. They just probably don't want to say anything about percentages anymore in keynotes and developer State of the Unions. So they didn't say this explicitly, but I think this was intentionally done to make it easier to track when a customer tips over to that 15% take rate so that you can calculate your proceeds. So this is something we already do at RevenueCat, but it'll make it easier for us to do it. And then if you're not running RevenueCat and you want to calculate the proceeds, you can use this recent subscription start date to kind of start the ticker to see when you're going to kick over to that 15%.
Yeah, that explanation makes a lot more sense. Like I thought it was like a weird time frame. I'm like, why?
Yeah, why 60
Why that
days?
gap?
Why?
Doesn't make sense to me. Like, it's
Yeah.
cool. Is it just like a random day? But this actually makes sense.
Yeah, and they were talking about win backs, and they talked about various things in the WWDC presentation. But bottom line, I think this is what it was really about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right, app transaction API. So, oh, and we lost Josh. Well, while we're waiting for him to come back, I will hit this one because it's actually kind of interesting. During the keynote, the ducks dropped, and people found this app transaction API, and they were excitedly thinking, oh, this will enable, this is Apple saying we're going to enable side loading, because it does allow you to validate that the transaction was completed on or that the app was downloaded from the App Store. But that's actually just one part of this API. One of the big things, and this is what they talked about in the WWDC session on it, was that it makes it easy to facilitate business model changes. So you can verify the original purchase date of or original purchase version and original purchase date of a customer, so that if you were switching from a single like one-time in-app purchase or a paid upfront app, and you wanted to move to subscriptions, and this is the example they gave in the session, was that you can give all of the existing users access to everything that they've had in the past. This is another one of those things where RevenueCat, we already let you easily look this up in the subscriber attributes. So it's not really going to change much for our customers, but it will make it easier for other folks to look at when that original purchase date was, so that you can grandfather users in who you want to charge a different subscription price or otherwise kind of favor them when you switch business models. And just since Josh hasn't come back yet, I will say there's a lot of, hey, Josh, welcome back. You there, Josh? I can't hear you. Get your mic. Still can't hear you. While Josh is working on his mic, you can, once you start talking, interrupt me. But Brennan asked in the questions, can that business model switch happen for an app that has a different bundle ID? I'm releasing a brand new app with a subscription model, but I'd like to give my existing users of the old version of my app that has a different bundle ID a discount on the subscription. And the answer to that is unfortunately no. So the transactions are bundle ID specific. And you can't see receipts from, as far as I know, and Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't see receipts from other apps in the developer account. The way that this has been done in the past is to force users to like hit a URL in the old app that attaches a string and is a deep link into the new app. That gives them that kind of grandfathering. You could also, because there is a shared space, a shared sandbox across apps in the same developer account, so you could put a flag in that shared storage and flag users who had the old app, but that means they would have to open the old app in order to do it. So no, Apple's still not facilitating the move from one bundle ID to another. And there's other business reasons of why you wouldn't want to switch bundle IDs. You lose all your SEO mojo in the App Store. You lose reviews, and there's a lot of other issues with doing that. So sorry, Brennan. And if you want to ask some more questions about that, happy to chat online about. It's something I've done myself and talked to a lot of developers about switching to the subscription business model. So yeah, we can talk more about that.
Okay, I think I'm back now.
Josh is back. All right.
So the Livestorm thing kicked me out. It thought my credentials were being used on a different computer somewhere.
Oh, wow.
And I kept like, I was using Chrome's like shared space or whatever it was kind of thing where it'll sync between computers, and maybe it did something weird. So
Gotcha.
I don't
All right,
know,
you're back.
but I'm here. All right. Did I miss anything?
I talked through the app transaction API pretty well. The only question that you and I were talking about earlier is side loading, and then so you did a little more deep diving into why Apple put in the docs that it could verify whether or not an app was downloaded on the App Store. It sounded very side loading.
I don't know if it's either for side loading or against side loading, because it could be for both.
Right.
Like you could check to see like, is this version cracked, hacked, installed, whatever, and then be like, hey, I'm gonna just disable all the things. Or if Apple does approve side loading, then you can be like, all right, I'm gonna use purchases outside of the App Store instead, like Stripe or something like that. So like it could go both ways. I don't want to assume which way it was intended for, but I'm just going to leave it as it could be used for both good and bad.
Yeah. And then one thing you were explaining to me as well is that this seems currently very targeted at Mac OS. So it's not Mac OS specific, so that Apple didn't have to limit it to Mac OS. But currently it does have application for Mac OS apps, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Because you can officially install those outside of the App Store. But this does work across iOS, tvOS, Catalyst, watchOS. Did I miss one?
iPadOS.
Yeah. So iPadOS. I think that counts as iOS in the docs. But yeah. It's for all. Mac is the one where it probably. Since which iOS version? I actually have the docs open right now. Let me find that tab. 16 plus. So, no, I lied. Hold on. Mac OS 13 plus, Watch OS 9 plus, iOS 16 plus. Yeah. Okay. And only an Xcode 14 and up is so you have to be relatively new in order to use this one.
Gotcha. So with that little hiccup and us already droning on and on, we're going to need to really start speed running these to get through the whole deck. So from here on, if you do have a question, drop it in the questions tab, and then upvote the ones you want answered. We will leave time for questions at the end, and that'll probably be a better way to manage the questions rather than Josh and I trying to read those live while we're speed running the rest of the slides. So yeah, drop things in the questions, upvote the ones you want answered. SwiftUI API. So this is pretty cool. They make it super easy now in SwiftUI to trigger an offer redemption sheet and a request review sheet. How does that impact RevenueCat customers?
So for the users that use RSDK, we actually had an offer code redemption sheet method that made this a one-line call. So it wasn't too hard to do in SwiftUI. It still actually might be less lines of code technically to use our way of doing it. But having your app be very SwiftUI is definitely nice. So they do offer a way to do this. And I think we might add similar SwiftUI things on our side, just so if people do want to still use our implementations of these, they still can.
We don't do the request review, right?
No, we don't do requests. Correct. Yeah, and this request review is still pretty simple to do. It was actually pretty easy to also do without SwiftUI. It just didn't feel very SwiftUI-y. But with request review, you still kind of want to do a lot of logic around it, like do it after a positive approach, after they use the app for a certain amount of time. So you still want to write code around that to trigger this at a specific time. But now calling it, there is a very SwiftUI method for it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. StoreKit Messages. This is another one. So
I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, as I mentioned early on, I have my frustrations with Apple. But then you see stuff like this and it's like, wow, this is really, Apple took a very thoughtful approach to this. And I was hypothesizing with Josh before the call that it seems like Apple, built up the StoreKit team to build StoreKit 2. And once they got over that hurdle of building out StoreKit 2, now they have some really talented engineers who are thinking and playing the long game on building out StoreKit and all the things around it in a very thoughtful way. And so watching the video on StoreKit Messages and then reading through the docs, they implemented this in a really thoughtful, future-looking way. So with all that buildup, Josh, what is StoreKit Messages, and why should people care?
Yeah, so this is a way for Apple to display information in your app, something that Apple needs to show. So right now, they really only talked about the increase in subscription price, which I believe does come through an email right now. But I know my email is a disaster, and I would probably miss it. And then I wouldn't consent to it. Then I would lose my subscription because I didn't agree to it. So it would just be bad for my experience. So with StoreKit Messages, Apple can actually throw up a sheet in your app itself saying, hey, price increase, do you want to accept? Which I would probably see a lot more often than the email version. And by default, it'll just show it whenever that message comes in and your app is up on your phone. But you can actually defer it and then show it whenever it is best in your app. So if your user is doing some critical thing, looking at a map or something like that, you don't want this to show up, but then you could show that after they're done with that critical thing.
Yeah, and then they did a lot of really smart things. So there's only one message, what did they call it? Message type or whatever.
Message type, I think, yeah.
Yeah, there's only currently one message type, but you can see that it was architected to handle future message reasons. And then the way they did this message listener was super smart as well. So, so like Josh was saying, it's like you open the app, somebody opens your app, you don't want to hit them with a sheet right away. Like the app review prompt, you want to hit them at a right time. And so when Apple dumps this into the queue, you get to choose when to show it, but Apple tracks whether or not it's been showed so that you're not going to show duplicate messages. So they did a lot of smart stuff there. And then Josh, you were kind of theorizing on some other potential uses for this in the future.
Yeah, like, I don't know, like if your credit card expires or something like that. Mine has, and I don't ever remember seeing any message from Apple. Maybe it comes in an email, maybe it doesn't. But if my credit card expires, my subscription wouldn't renew, and then we kind of get into the same thing again. So like that one, I don't know how that would work, because that one might show across multiple apps then if I have a bunch of subscriptions, but it would probably show in the app that would expire the soonest.
Yeah, but this is what's super cool about. Yeah, this is what's super cool about Apple doing it, though, is that, and this is something, again, I think a lot of people don't give Apple credit for, is that Apple manages dunning at an incredible scale. People maintain their credit card in Apple way more than they're going to go to Stripe and update their credit card for your one subscription. And what's cool about this is that it incentivizes, developers are incentivized to get the credit card updated. But then it's kind of a crowdsourced thing, right? And because Apple's handling it, I bet they're going to be able to do it intelligently, where has that been shown in any app, including the App Store? And then if it has, maybe you wait another 30 days to show it again. So they can kind of maybe throttle the messages, and they maybe even to track cross app, whether, so if it shows up in your queue and you don't display it, they may see that it gets displayed in a different app and then mark it as already seen in your app. So this would be a super cool use. I hope this is what Apple's thinking, and if not, I'm gonna file a feedback request saying that they should do this, because this is exactly the sort of reason why App Store payments can be great for developers, is that it just makes it so easy to have multiple apps, multiple subscriptions, all getting that person to update their credit card rather than relying on whatever email or something that you're sending. And if they're able to do it in app, all the better. So I'm excited to see that if they do this. I'm then excited to see how else they use this, because clearly they put a lot of thought into building this API.
Yeah, and I did just check, and this is only for iOS 16.
Okay.
And Mac nope, it is only iOS actually. It does say Catalyst. Okay, so
they're
it might come to
the
Mac.
future there. Yeah.
It'll come to Mac as Catalyst apparently, but not Mac as native Mac right now. I think according to the docs, but so yeah, if you're on iOS 15, you won't get to use this, but new ones you will.
Cool. App Store Connect API. I know you're super excited about this.
Super excited about this, yes.
So we could talk another 30 minutes, but give us the TLDR. And I'm really curious. So those of you watching might not realize Josh is the lead maintainer of Fastlane, which already does interact with the official App Store API and maybe even some unofficial bits.
The unofficial ones, yes.
But so I'd love to hear first about App Store Connect API, and then maybe some thoughts on things that RevenueCat may handle for developers in the future, and then things that you're excited to implement in Fastlane that are maybe kind of adjacent to RevenueCat or don't make sense for us to build.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about this one. This is one of the major APIs that we were missing. But I mean, I completely understood it because there is a lot there, and it is a very important one that does a lot of potentially dangerous things.
Right.
So yeah, this one now you can create, edit, delete IAPs. So consumables, not consumables, subscriptions, create your subscription groups, anything that you can do on App Store Connect that deals with subscription and things, you can now do with this. So you can query all your how much your subscriptions are, update them if you want, submit them for review, which Apple does have to approve of some of your product updates, but it doesn't necessarily need to happen with a new app update itself. And then you can create offers and promo codes. So if you want to, I think right now with promo codes, when I was doing it for my personal apps, I had to do it in the website, do it I don't know, very manual process, was kind of slow.
Yeah.
Copy and paste them, then send them over to whatever thing. Now you could easily create a shortcut that does this for you. And I'm super excited about that one.
Yeah, that's super cool. And so what aspects of this do you think we'll be working on at RevenueCat? And then what do you think Fastlane will be working on? And then are there stuff that developers might need to do themselves, or will they just be able to rely on Fastlane and RevenueCat to build it out?
For Fastlane, we're going to implement pretty much all of the new APIs that exist, because right now all of our IAP stuff is very legacy and it is not great to use. It still works, but if something breaks, it's going to be impossible to fix now. So as soon as this comes out, I'm going to spend 2-3 days nonstop to try and get that out. But it shouldn't be too hard to do, hopefully. But if you have a lot of consumables or non-consumables that you create, let's say if you're a video provider and you want to manually create consumables to buy stuff or non-consumables, right now you have to do that in the dashboard kind of thing, where you could automate this relatively quickly and it's going to go through. So if you have to create hundreds a month, thousands a month, you can do that, automate that on your end. So for me personally, creating IPs is probably not something that I'm going to use it for, because I don't have a business of that size. But more for big apps, this is probably something that they'll use a lot. In terms of RevenueCat stuff, so right now the products are entered by the identifier manually. This would be a way that we could query them to make sure they match up, pull them in automatically if we needed, validate that everything in our configuration works, so that when you go to use our SDK, everything is going to connect there. I know when I first started doing some stuff on my side, I entered things wrong, misspelled things, copied an extra space, and then things didn't
Right.
connect up, and there's errors that I have to go look in the app, and I'm like, okay, like what's going on? Why didn't this work? And it's because I spelled something wrong. Now we can like validate that your stuff is actually good before you use the SDK.
Yeah. Is there, since we're able to query, is this something where we could actually query daily to look for price changes and actually like track price changes more carefully on our end?
Yeah, that's going to be a huge thing for us. Just because now you can change subscription prices, and it'll probably happen more often because it's easier to do and consent. We could pull for those daily or when a new price comes in, and actually like update our charts then to go with that information.
Yeah, very
so
cool.
One thing about this is that developers will have to give us an API key for us to use this. So it's not something that users will just get for free. They got to give us that key for us to be authorized to query this information.
But way better than having to store credentials and things like that.
100%. Yeah, I don't want to store any Apple ID passwords or anything like that.
Yeah, totally. All right, we got through that fairly quick. Surprising. Good job. StoreKit testing. So this is something I actually have not had the time to dive deep into. So I'm going to have a lot of questions. So one of the big things is that StoreKit configuration files can now be automatically generated. Why does that matter? And will that streamline things?
100% yes. So just as I entered IDs wrong in our side, when you create a StoreKit configuration file, you kind of want those IDs to match up. And I messed this up a whole bunch of times, and you pretty much have to create your StoreKit configuration file to match what you have on the App Store. So you have like your subscriptions, your consumables, your non-consumables, and like getting that is kind of a process. And you're like, you have this information already. Why can't you just do it yourself? Right. So I created a plugin for this that I scripted out a few months ago to do it for myself, because my apps have like 6 products or so, and I have 4 apps, and I didn't want to do that for all of them. But now I can trash that code since Xcode 14 has this built in.
Very cool.
So you can create a synced StoreKit configuration file, which will pull all of your products from your App Store Connect account. And that'll actually stay synced. So if you want to test exactly what you have on production, you totally can. If you want to do more tests locally, you can actually like pull this out of the synced state and still edit it locally, add different subscription types, different lengths if you want, just to test more things. But you can't sync that back up then. But you can create another synced version.
Right.
So this will save developers here like a bunch of time. Just there's so many less steps because there's almost no steps.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then what about the new transaction inspector?
Yeah, so I haven't played with this one yet. I have Xcode 14, but I haven't been able to do it on my personal apps yet. But this will actually make testing all the StoreKit stuff so much easier, because previously, years and years ago, your testing was pretty much on your physical device, sandbox mode. You couldn't really like do a lot of easy tests for renewals, price increases, expirations, and like seeing all the information about that those transactions. With new transaction inspector, this uses the StoreKit configuration files and all the transactions that go through there, and you can see all the subscriptions you belong to, consumables, non-consumables, like what groups they belong to, when they expire. But you can also simulate price increase. If a user rejected the price increase, you can pretty much mock any behavior that a user would happen and do it locally and quickly. So for us and developing our SDK, this is going to be awesome for us to test and make sure like our code is actually behaving properly with all this stuff. And then for our users, they can do the same thing for their like specific use cases that they're implementing.
Yeah, that's
so
incredible.
It's pretty much getting rid of pretty much getting rid of having to rely on Sandbox. You still want to use Sandbox because it is a more real life environment, even though Sandbox can be a little bit buggier than production. Using all three is still great, but this will get a lot of the different things that can happen done a lot quicker.
That's awesome. Yeah, I kind of I wrote essentially the definitive guide to testing subscriptions, and I wrote it based on my knowledge from like 2016, 2017 when I was migrating my apps to subscriptions. And I mean, probably most of the people in the audience also realize what a huge pain it's been historically, and even still is to test. So yeah, we need to update that post and build out some good documentation around what developers should be testing, because this is going to make it so much easier and have a lot more confidence that things are going to work in production. The next one here is Swift docc. So I never realized that documentation was something that everybody has their own style. Everybody has their own approach to documentation. And you were explaining to me that bouncing back and forth between Apple's documentation, a random other developer documentation, some other SDK documentation is actually a huge pain. And that's part of why Apple created Swift docc. So why is RevenueCat now using it, and how does it simplify things?
Yeah, so we were using, I think, Jazzy before docc, which was kind of like the open source third-party created one that kind of did similar things. But Apple created docc, I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago. And we just started using it with our StoreKit 2 updates. But it takes the doc that we have in our SDK and creates like a web version of that. And this web version matches Apple's styles exactly. So when you're an Apple platform developer and you use our docs, they are designed and look and function and search everything the exact same way. So it is exactly what you would expect from a Apple platform SDK.
And then it's super cool too that you're
cool.
documenting in the code. So when you're changing a bit of code, it's an instant reminder to change the documentation there, and then the documentation just gets auto updated whenever that pull request gets merged, which that's super cool.
Yeah. So with this one, it did only work. docc did only work with Swift. So if you had any older SDKs, docc wouldn't work. So we just recently migrated over to Swift, so we could use docc. We couldn't use docc before, but now older SDKs still can, and it actually is a bit more usable now. Navigation bar is there, where before there wasn't this nice way to navigate, and you can search for things, and it is a super nice update, and we get it for free, which is awesome.
Very cool.
I think our docs were updated a day after this was announced to this.
Nice.
So
nice. So for our customers, and hopefully customers of other SDKs out there, you'll see some real improvements to the documentation, which I hadn't, I don't code myself, and so I'd never paid attention to these things, but RevenueCat gets a lot of kudos for how well documented our stuff is. And I just didn't realize, not being a coder myself, what a hassle it is when other SDKs aren't as well documented. So one, it's great to see Apple building this out and now continuing to improve it. But then also just really cool that we're using it and document stuff pretty well. So kudos to the rest of the RevenueCat team who actually does that work.
Agreed. Yeah.
I sure hear about it.
It's so good.
Yeah. skAd network. Oh, this one's me.
Yeah, school me on this one. I know nothing about skAd network, how you use it, why you would use it, what it does. So this one's all on you.
Yeah. So, I could talk for 30 minutes on this, and we probably will do either a webinar. Yeah, or a webinar or a podcast. to dive deeper, Apple introduced hierarchical IDs and conversion values. And so essentially what Apple's trying to do, and I'm still a little frustrated with skAd network, even with 4.0, which was a huge update, but it's a very kind of academic exercise to not leak any possible personal data, versus kind of a trade-off. Because at scale, if a little bit of personal data does happen to leak at scale, Facebook's not going to build something to get a tiny bit of extra personal data on one user here and one user there. Like if it's not working at scale, it's not going to work. And so Apple in the original skAd network really felt like an academic exercise to allow zero possibility of leaking personal information. But then was built in a very kind of Apple way of not really understanding what the industry needed. And so what 4.0 does is tries to give a little more flexibility, again, without sacrificing any privacy. And so the hierarchical IDs mean that you can get up to a 4-digit conversion value. And if there's enough, if there are enough users who are in a specific cohort, so that 4 digits won't be enough to leak an ID. So you could think if there's only 10,000 people if there's 10,000 people in a cohort, you can send a 4-digit ID and not tag each individual user. And so they introduced this concept of crowd anonymity. I totally botched that one.
This is rough.
But if there aren't very many people in the cohort, you get a 2-digit conversion value. If there are more people, if you have medium anonymity, got it that time, you get a 3-digit conversion value. And then if it's a very large cohort, you get the 4-digit. And so that is going to help larger apps who do operate at scale be able to get more conversion data without leaking any private information. So it is really cool that they did this. And again, I mean, I could talk for a long time on the specifics. I probably kind of botched the summary, but hopefully that kind of makes sense. Like the more people who are in a specific cohort, the more granularity you're going to be able to get on what exact ad they saw, what network it came from, and things along those lines. So the next thing is multiple conversion values. So originally, Apple had this super convoluted timer system where once somebody launches the app, a timer starts, and you have a certain amount of time. I think it was up to like 30 days to send these conversion postbacks. But once you sent the conversion postback, that started a second timer, and that second timer was variable between 24 and 48 hours. Again, a very kind of like academic exercise of like, we can't leak any personal data, so we're not even going to let them send the postbacks in real time. We're going to create this dual timer system, and so you only got one shot. And so if you were trying to measure something down funnel, and you waited a week, the number of people in the cohort was going to reduce, and you were going to get way less signal on those ad conversions. And so what these multiple conversions values do now is that you have like 0 to 3 days to send one conversion value, and then that one goes, and it doesn't like sacrifice anything to go ahead and send that one. And there's no like convoluted timers and things like that. And then there's the next range, I think is 3 days to 7 days. So you can send a second conversion value and then a third conversion value to kind of measure that deeper in the funnel events. And then the second and third conversion value aren't going to be as, they're going to be more coarse, not as granular, again, to prevent tracking. So that's probably more detail than any of you really care to know. I'll get to the TLDR. Web to skAd network. This is actually pretty cool, and I'm interested to see if this enables better advertising on the web. So if you're advertising an app on the web, you pretty much are wanting to send people to the App Store to download your app, but the App Store is a complete black box. So even with the IDFA, if you were on the web, website cannot get the user's IDFA. So even pre-ATT, web advertising for apps was not a huge thing because it broke as soon as you send somebody to the App Store. There was fingerprinting and other stuff that people still try and do and have done in the past, but it's just not super reliable. So now, when you send somebody to the App Store, you can actually send skAd network data as well and track them all the way through into actually launching the app and get those conversion values based on the web advertisement. So this could be a big deal in that app advertising on the web had just never really taken off. And so being able to advertise more on the web and actually measure the results of this, I think could really open more opportunities. And then there are a few caveats. Apple said later this year, so it's probably not coming out in the fall with iOS 16. So, maybe November or December, may get pushed to 2023.
Yep.
It also may be iOS 16 only. So then you're going to be waiting for the everybody to update in order to be able to send these hierarchical IDs and multiple conversion values. So the impact of this will probably not be felt, and then Facebook and others have to build the tech to actually make use of all of this. So really, we're talking Q1, maybe even Q2 2023 before any of this really matters. But the TLDR is that it is a huge step forward. So I know ads get ragged on a lot. I think Facebook especially created a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth, and a lot of the bad stuff that happened with the IDFA kind of reflected on the ad industry, and for good reason. I mean, there's a lot of crappy stuff going on with the IDFA that Apple was right to enact something with to prevent all of this privacy violation. But at a fundamental level, ads and measuring the performance of those ads are not immoral. When you're building a product, you need to get attention, and being able to buy that attention via ads is a very normal part of the business process. And then being able to measure the results of those ads is an important part of that process. And then on the display ad side, doing some level of targeting where the ad isn't completely irrelevant. This is something I've actually come to appreciate about Instagram, is the ads are pretty cool. Like, they actually are relevant to me. They're good ads. And so I think the ad industry generally kind of gets thrown under the bus because they did do a lot of crappy stuff. But skAd network to me is the first like bright light off in the distance saying, okay, maybe we can actually have good ads, good ad measurement, and respect privacy. And so it's super exciting to me that Apple is going to start marching down this road of building out a privacy-focused ad measurement platform with skAd network. So I've ranted way more than I should have, but hopefully that's informative for you folks. I'm more the TLDR side.
I do want to hear more about this in some other kind of format, though.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing, and let's go real quick. We can stay late to answer questions. So I guess we got 5 minutes for this answer, and then I can
do this one in 5 minutes.
All right. So App Store Server API.
Yeah, so this one won't have a direct effect on our end users because we already do a lot of what these new changes do already. This will be for people that aren't using us, and this is also stuff that we'll adopt too. But the App Store Server API, which is how we query subscription statuses, transaction history, all of those things, is getting some new fields. One is the environment that it was purchased in, which is either going to be sandbox or production. This is unlike the one that is in the StoreKit model, which also has Xcode. Xcode is not something that the App Store server deals with directly. because Xcode stays locally. So this is only getting sandbox and production. And then it's also getting that I'm gonna botch this again. The recent subscription start date. That one. That one, yeah. So it is also getting that. Those are 2 new fields. The App Store Server v2 transaction history endpoint, which already exists, is getting more fields for filtering and sorting. So you can sort transactions in descending order, meaning you get your newest transactions first. And you can also filter by like user, product, subscription type. There's a few more in there. But this is nice because it can make for a more performant server. You don't have to get all of the transactions at once and filter and sort locally, which is more work on Apple's API because you have to get all the things at once, more work on your side because you have to do a lot of this stuff locally. Here, you're just getting directly what you need. So
I saw too, there was a field for the last revision. So you can just basically say, give me everything since the last revision. So then you're not having to reparse all the
stuff
transactions every single time.
Yeah. Something that's like years old or something like that.
Yeah. Is that field new this year? Okay.
Remember, I had no interest in IAPs over a year ago. So that's brand new for me this year. I don't exactly know the history of transaction history. But I think the docs do show what is newly added. And there is a revision on the docs for this. I just don't know them off the top of my head.
Yeah. But TLDR for RevenueCat customers is like, we've already been doing all this for you for multiple years. I mean, since pretty much the beginning of RevenueCat. I mean, early on, we relied almost completely on polling. Now, if you do put your server-to-server API key into the RevenueCat dashboard, which I highly recommend, we do pretty much get real-time subscription lifecycle events. And this is something that really is super important if you're running a subscription app. I had this experience recently, talked about it in another webinar and on the podcast, but I had previously subscribed to the Zero app and used it. It's for like time restricted feeding, intermittent fasting. And so I used it for a while and just hadn't been using it lately. I go to the App Store to unsubscribe and hadn't opened the app in probably weeks, maybe months. And I'm in the App Store app and I hit unsubscribe. And before I could even switch to my email, I get an email from Zero saying, hey, we've confirmed that you unsubscribed. It was a really great user experience to get that confirmation of like, hey, they know I've unsubscribed, and that's a great time for most developers. They weren't doing a win back, but if they would have sent a coupon code and been like, hey, $30 for the next year, I may have taken them up on that because I probably will use the app again at some point. And so having it happen in that near real time, from us being able to push those events through RevenueCat to a CRM platform is incredibly important. So if you haven't already entered those credentials into our dashboard, do it and set up your cancellation event, win back campaigns. But then we also still, to this day, fall back on polling the App Store, where it's like we have the receipt server side and, hey, Apple has something changed. And then, hours later, hey, Apple has something changed. And so eventually we'll probably be able to stop polling and rely on this completely. But we have continued to find, holes and other issues with retries and other things that Apple wasn't doing well and missing server-to-server notifications. So it looks like this is going to maybe be the final piece and we can slowly wean ourselves off of the polling. And so if you are a RevenueCat customer, you don't even worry about it because we've been doing all this. And
delete this slide.
Yeah. And if you're not a RevenueCat customer, it's a lot of work. But you can build against these server-to-server notifications now and do some of what we do. But there's
a little bit easier, but
it's a lot of work.
Still a lot of work.
Yeah. All right. We did it. 1 hour. So I know some of you may need to jet, but Josh and I do have some time, so we'll answer a few questions. If you have any additional questions, go ahead and drop them in the questions now, and then upvote the ones you are most excited to hear the answer to. So the first question from Jim is the process of adding new IAP and RevenueCat can be simplified. Right now, I have to enter several bits of info in several places, product offerings. Would be nice to have a quick setup path where most of the variables would be provided. Do you see something like this coming up on your roadmap soon? Josh?
This is definitely something we're excited about because the possibilities are here without us having to have your Apple ID now. So I don't really have any like concrete information yet since it's still relatively new and we kind of had plans already. But like this is something that is a pain point for users when something does go wrong. We see it, we hear about it, we want to fix, we want things to just magically work even more. So this is definitely something that we do want to see.
Yeah, I think safe to say it was immediately put on the roadmap, but in what priority order has yet to be determined. Yeah. And neither Josh nor I are product managers at RevenueCat. We actually have a whole team now of product managers, and so it's going to be on them to prioritize. But I can say from being part of the chatter in the RevenueCat Slack over the past couple of weeks, that we are incredibly excited about this. It's something we've actually been talking about for years.
It's something I personally want as well, because I do have 4 apps on RevenueCat. I'm working on making a 5th, and like I don't want to enter this stuff myself. So like if I can just if it can do it for me, like yes, please. So I want it from a RevenueCat developer standpoint and also as a user standpoint as well.
Yeah. So to be determined on when we will ship it, but it is on the roadmap and we're excited. All right. Next up from Abu, do they fix the problem when upgrade, downgrade, cost grade subscription? You'll get multiple active subscriptions in the sandbox. Have you had time to dig into that yet, Josh?
No, sandbox is always a little bit dicey. Which is why like having the new transaction stuff in Xcode for StoreKit config files is super nice, because that one is a little bit easier to test all of these things. I've never personally seen that problem in the sandbox, so I can't super answer it. But I feel like the ideal situation is to test most of these scenarios using the StoreKit configuration file now.
Yep, makes sense. All right, James asks, I have several apps that use RevenueCat and would love to offer a bundle and get all apps for a single lifetime price. Is this possible with RevenueCat? That's a good one. Have you looked into this, Josh?
All apps that use RC would love to offer a bundle to get all apps for a single life. Okay, so that is using the same or allowing subscriptions to work across multiple apps, and we actually do offer that. I think we released that feature last year. I think it's also a native app store feature as well, but RevenueCat does make it a little bit easier. As long as all of your apps are in the same RevenueCat account. Same RevenueCat account. Yeah. Project. I'm look at the docs for this. There are docs.
This might be a good one to search.
Not coming to me.
Yeah, this might be a good one, James, to search the community as well, community.revenuecat.com. I'm pretty sure I've seen a thread in the community about doing this. And if there isn't a thread, there should be.
Totally there.
So so you find the thread or post, and Josh or somebody else will jump in and explain in more detail. And as Josh was saying, I believe it's in our docs. So
yeah, as long as you're using I think it's all the apps in the same project. They can see the entitlements that you grant, and they're shared across all the apps. There's no way to like put this bundle like on the App Store. It has to be done and marketed through one of your apps. So if you in app 1 say you subscribe to this and unlock access to app B, C, and D, then that you can configure it to work that way.
Gotcha. All right, next question. If we are starting with a new app now, is there any upcoming RevenueCat SDK feature to look out for? Are we expecting any major client-side features that could change the way we use the SDK?
The answer to this is there is probably no major client-side changes since we just released iOS v4, which was the Objective-C to Swift rewrite, which allowed us to use StoreKit 1 and StoreKit 2. So if this question was asked a year ago, it would have been, yes, there's a lot of changes to look forward to, because it was a major SDK change. It was a breaking change, even though we did have a lot of like Xcode fixits that helped direct the migration. But right now, there aren't any super major changes that to look out for, except for some of the ones that we talked about on that StoreKit slide that users will get for free. So using a new app now, creating a new app now with our iOS v4 SDK, there shouldn't be anything that is going to change. There may be some more features that do get added, but it's nothing that's going to break stuff.
Cool. That is great to know. Yeah, I know it's been a ton of work getting that Swift. And I'm actually excited because now that it's kind of like Apple with StoreKit 2, it's like now that Apple's over the hump with StoreKit 2, it's exciting to see what the StoreKit team does, because now they've got, a whole team of very talented engineers that kind of got over this big hurdle and can now start doing really thoughtful stuff like the StoreKit messages. So I'm personally excited for RevenueCat that we've gotten over this, massive hurdle, and our incredibly talented team, Josh and the other Josh. We have two Joshes on the engineering team working on the same projects, which is fun. And Andy and Maddie, and we have some incredible SDK engineers. So I'm excited to see, now that we got over this huge hurdle, what's going to be in store. But since we are over the hurdle, as Josh said, there shouldn't be any major breaking changes, just new features added and making things easier. So next question, when the user launches my old app after my new app is released, can I generate a unique offer code for that user to get a discount on the new subscription version of my app? Again, separate bundle IDs. Not sure if offer codes can be unique to a specific user's Apple ID. The answer. Go ahead.
I was gonna say you could. I think you could end up adding a different. Well, I don't know about an offer code, but you could back support them access to other ones. Use it adding a different entitlement to that old product, and then maybe dynamically showing another cheaper subscription or something in app to subscribe to all of the. That was gonna be my solution. I don't know if there's an actual proper solution. I should let you answer first. I didn't actually know.
Well, to answer the question specifically, the offer codes, as far as I know, are tied to the specific bundle ID. Like when you set them up in App Store Connect, you're within the app. You're not kind of in a global system. And I was actually just recently trying to set up promo codes and offer codes. There's no attach multiple apps or anything like that. I mean, for Apple, this unfortunately, Apple has not made these kind of business transactions a priority to support. I mean, these business transitions, I think I said transactions. And when I was moving my app from paid upfront to subscription, we had to do a lot of work to figure out how we were going to grandfather, what discounts we were going to offer, and all of that. And it's just something that I think Apple sees as enough of an edge case that they haven't built a lot out. I think the new transaction API is a signal hey, we realize people have been doing this and we're going to make it a little bit easier. But again, it's actually something we already made super easy in RevenueCat with our subscriber attributes. So that, Brennan, this actually would be a great topic. I do weekly office hours where I talk through these kind of things. So hit me up, David at RevenueCat, and you can schedule an office hours call to chat through this. I know it sounds like you maybe have your mind made up that they need to transition from an old SKU to a new SKU. There are quite a few cases where I would not recommend doing that. You may have some specific reasons, but a lot of this is not applicable to the rest of the folks on the call. So let's chat directly. And then I should probably write a blog post on this, and then I could just point you to the blog post. We do have one blog post on transitioning that gets into some of the technical details on entitlements and checking subscriber attributes for what version they previously owned. But it doesn't go into these kind of details about kind of transitioning your whole business model and moving from one SKU to the other. So, so yeah, let's chat in an office hours in the future, Brendan. Emmanuel asks, I sometimes see a subscription convert months after a 3-day trial starts. Could that be triggered by a user updating their expired credit card details and opening the app again for the first time since it had expired? Or what could possibly do that? So I'll take this one, Josh.
Oh God, I don't know.
Yeah. So actually, you may have seen Emmanuel and actually been on we did a different webinar in February, I believe, and it's on YouTube now, called App Store Accounting. And in researching for that webinar, I was actually looking at my transaction data and found a similar thing where there was a transaction that was initiated, and this was not a subscription app. This was even I think it was one of my paid upfront apps. I only have one left, but the transaction was initiated, but did not actually complete for something like 35 days. And so this apparently is not subscription specific. And I think what's going on is that Apple tries very hard to get your money for you and for them. Another thing about the rev share between Apple and developers, that Apple is highly incentivized to help us collect that money. So I think what ends up happening is some combination of insufficient funds, outdated credit card. There's probably multiple reasons that the initial transaction didn't complete. And then Apple works hard to make sure that transaction does eventually complete. And in the docs, it says the grace period is only 7 to 10 days. But like you, I've seen transactions that were live for up to 35 days. I have theories, if somebody is using a App Store gift card and don't have a credit card attached to their App Store account, it may be that Apple knows that and they wait for it to get filled back up again to then go ahead and charge the transaction. Again, if they're using a debit card and they're or a credit card and the credit card's maxed out, if they get an insufficient funds, then Apple probably smartly tries again, after a payday or after a certain amount of time, and then continues to retry it. So that's likely what's going on in that case. And I don't think they actually have to reopen the app for that to happen. I believe Apple continues to do that in the background, both as part of the grace period. For subscriptions, there is the specific grace period that you can enable in App Store Connect. But apparently, again, this happened on one of my apps that is not a subscription. So I think all transactions, Apple continually tries to close out that transaction instead of just canceling it. All right. Laredo asks, Dave was talking about instant email from a subscription cancellation. Is there a doc that describes how to link a CRM to RevenueCat/Apple subscription events? So the most straightforward way to do that is to use one of our integration partners. So Braze, Intercom, Iterable, OneSignal. I shouldn't be naming names because now I've probably forgotten one, and hopefully whoever integration partner is listening doesn't realize I forgot them. But that's the most straightforward way to do it, because those integrations do stream those events live to those CRM platforms. If it's a CRM platform that's not supported, or if you're rolling your own, you can use our webhooks to stream those events to whatever you're using to kick off those emails. So there are docs around all the integrations and how to get them set up.
Link the docs into
awesome
the chat right now.
And then there's the webhook docs. If you do need to roll your own, you would look at the webhook docs for how to stream those events to the to whatever CRM you want to use or custom setup even.
Can I reply directly to this question in here?
I think just drop it in the chat.
All right, I'm gonna drop in the chat then. There.
All right. All right. We'll make this
entire list there.
We'll make this the last question because we have gone quite long, and we went so long that my camera overheated.
Oh, nice. All right.
Or I think that was like auto shut off or something. I'm back. So Nick asked, does RevenueCat have an implementation of the StoreKit 2 function that restores IAPs proactively if the user is downloading on a new device?
So we do have the method that our developers can call to restore the purchases. I don't. Hold on, I'm trying to think here. This is, I don't want to say it's a loaded question, but if you,
well, I'll answer it because I think I actually know the answer to this one. So if they're opening on a new device, there is an App Store receipt that's going to be on device that we're going to collect on app open. And then if that receipt is already on our server, once that's uploaded, the local cache is going to be updated to say they have the entitlement. And so I don't know exactly in code, since I don't code, how it's implemented in my apps, but this is something I've actually tested and talked to some of the developers I work with specifically about, is that if you open our app and you're a subscriber, it's just unlocked. And so I know there's a way to do it. I don't know at a code level the way to do it. But one thing to keep in mind too is that RevenueCat does cache locally the subscriber attributes and the entitlements and all the data. So you don't have to wait on a server call to ping our server before you unlock, because the worst thing you want to do is create a blocking UI and then they happen to be on the subway or something and then the app won't load. So I know there's a way to do this. And again, check the docs, check the community, and my camera overheated again.
I'll link the restoring purchases docs. It doesn't do it. It actually, I'm pretty certain it doesn't do it automatically, because sometimes if you're restoring the purchases, it might want you to log in. So it will prompt that, and we don't want to force that. If you identify your user with our login method, then we will pull down all of the transactions and subscriptions and whatnot that we have on our server side and pull those down automatically, so that the user won't have to manually restore. But that requires our developer to click or to do the login method. But Apple does recommend still that you have a restore purchases button in your app for users to manually click. And that restore purchases could prompt the authorization again. So we don't do it automatically because of that prompt. But if you are able to identify your user with our login method as soon as your app opens, or having your user do some sort of auth, then we'll pull those down automatically.
Yeah, and that's probably what we do. So we don't have logins in my apps, and so on app launch, I think we use the login method to send the receipt up to RevenueCat, and then all that essentially for us happens automatically, because you don't. And it's actually kind of tricky, because you don't actually have to restore purchases to restore purchases, because the initial receipt that's on the device will have that unique ID that once you've uploaded to RevenueCat. So, and like Josh said, triggering the actual restore purchases dialog can force the user to log in, which is a terrible experience. But again, because we're storing everything server side, if they've ever used the app before and you had the RevenueCat SDK installed, which is probably 99% of the people who are coming back to an app, it essentially feels like it's automatic because you use that login event. And then if you do have a user login, then as part of the user login, you would then identify that user, and then it would just automatically have all their purchases.
If you have any further questions, just create a community post, and we'll discuss more solutions in there.
All right. Well, that was fun. Thank you, everyone. went longer than intended, but it always does. And we probably could have talked another 2 hours if we'd have gotten more to detail. But I hope this was helpful for everybody. And we'll be sharing the video of this for those who didn't make it. And for those of you who did make it, you will still get an email letting you know when it hits our YouTube channel and when it's live. So thank you, everyone. And let us know, too, if you have any feedback on questions we should have asked, or format, or anything like that. I personally run the webinar events here at RevenueCat, and am happy to continue evolving to what feels useful. So if you have a suggestion for changing format, for topics that you want covered in a webinar, just let me know. David@revenuecat.com. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See ya.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks for having me.